Hello, everyone. Welcome back to I See What You're Saying, the Disciplined Listening Podcast. I'm Michael Reddington, and today it is my pleasure to welcome our next guest, David Phillips. David is an educator and an instigator. His words, not mine, but I totally agree. He teaches companies how to solve problems with human-centered design. He does that through his company, Faster Glass, where he teaches people to apply design thinking to human issues and opportunities. This is a great conversation. David is amazing. This is going to be all gas, no brakes, wall to wall. David is going to give us plenty of insight and examples on how we can apply this design thinking and problem solving framework to communication problems, business problems, interpersonal issues. It's a tremendous conversation. I'm really excited to share with you. Get a few pens ready before we go much further. Of all the things we're going to talk about, he's going to start by talking about why it's so important to find the right problem to solve in the first place. We're going to talk a little bit about data delusion, why sometimes what we believe is the right data can be sending us in the wrong direction. Of course, he's going to outline how we can apply the 6 steps of design thinking and so much more. Really glad you're here for another great episode. Thank you so much. While you're here, we would be grateful. Please just take a quick second to like the show, subscribe to the show, share it with your network, and leave us your feedback. We really would love to hear from you. And while you're online today, please check out our sponsor. Head over to humantel.com. You can read all of their resources and then choose the science-backed training program you think is right for you as you begin to develop the skill set necessary to recognize what people are likely thinking and feeling by seeing when their facial expressions and nonverbal communications change. You can enter the code INQUASIVE25 for 25% off the training of your choice while you're there. I highly recommend it over at humantel.com. For the professional interviewers in the room, please head over to certifiedinterviewer.com. That's where you can get all your questions answered about the International Association of Interviewers. How do you join? How do you contribute? What do you get from it? And the Certified Forensic Interviewer designation. How do you qualify? How do you earn the designation? What can it mean for you in your career moving forward? All of that is at certifiedinterviewer.com. And while you're online today, please check out inquasive.com. That's where you can learn more about the programs our clients ask us to facilitate for their senior leaders, sales teams, HR teams, and more to teach them how to apply the strategic observation and questioning techniques necessary to provoke productive responses that help you solve problems and build relationships. All of that and more at inquasive.com. We really appreciate you being here for another week. Thank you so very much. So now, without further ado, I introduce to you David Phillips. David, it is so great to see you. How are you today?
I'm good, Michael. Good to see you as well, man. Thanks. I appreciate this.
Oh, man, I'm looking forward to this. We've known each other for a few years now. I've seen you do your thing before. I'm fascinated by it. I love how I guess I'm just in general, I'm fascinated by problem solving. And I love how you approach thinking and solving and how that wraps into communicating. So before I just steal all your stuff from you, I will stop and say, I think what you do is awesome. And I'm really excited to start talking about it.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I feel incredibly lucky that this is what I get to do for a living. I mean, it's kind of blows my mind at times.
Well, let's not tell anyone. We'll keep it a secret.
There's some junior high teachers somewhere I'd like to say, hey, look, being a knucklehead, it can pay off.
Paid off. Yeah, there's probably a lot of my teachers and some other civil employees who would be surprised if they knew what I grew up to be.
Yeah.
But before I confess too much more, here's the first question I want to ask you right out of the gate, because I really am fascinated with what you do. Could you please explain to us what human-centered design is?
I will try. So I think of it as kind of a two-part response.
Got it.
So the first part, human-centered design, also known as design thinking, is basically a discipline, right? It's a set of principles and practices, tools and techniques that designers have been taught how to use for decades. And the rest of us who aren't designers have, by hook or by crook, somehow come across them and went, wait a minute, we could use that for what we do, whether it's problem solving or product development or innovation or whatever. So that's kind of one part of it. The human-centered piece specifically is about whatever it is you're trying to do. You're trying to solve a problem. You're trying to develop a product. You're trying to improve a process. Is that you are laser focused, which is kind of odd because then you're going to expand your scope. But you are laser focused on the people that you're designing for, hopefully designing with. right? What do they need or want? And sometimes they can't tell you, right? They have unarticulated needs or unmet needs. So you got to go work, you got to dig, you got to do some discovery. But of everything you're doing, you want to make sure you are focused on those people because it's really easy. Almost every organization will say they are customer centric. Man, it is so easy to become product centric almost by default. I mean, think about any network. Hey, what do you do? So we tell people what we do. And so we can get locked in. I do this and I do that, and I have this product and I have this service, and people need it. And so we'll just keep tweaking it, and we become us centered, company centered, product centered, whatever centered, and we can easily lose sight of being human centered.
Which is so important in everything that we do. And it's funny that you say, we tell people we do a good job, right? We do good at this, we do good at that. Our product's great for this, our product is great for that. Recency bias is my best bias. Last night, I was trying to get my son to wrestling practice, and so all of my healthy friends are going to shake their head at me. Whatever, I'll deal with it. But I took him to Whataburger. He'd never been to Whataburger before, and so I bring him to Whataburger. He loves it. Whatever, we're good. Now he has food. We can take him to practice. And when we're sitting there, while we were waiting for our food, he's like, "This food's going to be really good." I'm like, why do you say that? You've never eaten here before. He's like, because they said it on the commercial. Now, my son's 8. So I start laughing. I'm like, hey, buddy, have you ever watched the restaurant commercial and had them go, honestly, our food's kind of garbage, but we'll sell it to you cheap? And he starts laughing. He's like, no, I guess not. I'm like, so let's talk about marketing and how that works, dude.
Yeah, exactly.
But a lot of times, to your point, that's what we get focused on, right? Trying to sell the product, the service, the thing, as opposed to figuring out what other people need. And you've got me right out of the gate with this design thinking was really initially developed for something else entirely.
Yeah.
But you looked at it and said, whoa, hang on. This actually really applies somewhere else. And you had the insight to bring it over here and start using it, not so much for product design, but for human design. I know I'm stealing it from the first question from the title of what you do, but how do we connect with others? How do we do that digging? How do we find out what they need? So you mentioned problem solving already. How does this process assist with problem solving?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I answer that question, let me just go back though. I am not the person who said, hey, look what designers are learning. I bet we could use this. Some other people figured that out. I simply went, oh, that's awesome. We could make use of this. So I actually initially stumbled over this when I was at Bank of America.
Okay.
And became an internal innovation consultant, basically trying to spread design thinking and human-centered design within what at the time was a very Six Sigma-oriented culture.
Got it.
So yeah, so I cannot take credit for being the genius who said, hey, we should use that here. But I'm absolutely, when I heard about it, I'm like, yes, I want to be a part of that. All right. So what was your question?
Problem solving.
Yes. So, and this is where listening comes in almost immediately, right? So there is a process, right? There's a framework for design thinking, and it typically starts with, what problem are we trying to solve, right? What is the design challenge, right? What are people trying to accomplish, whatever it might be? Most times it starts with the problem. Sometimes, however, we were like, let's go out and use these tools to find some problems worth solving, right? Some customer problems. They don't even realize this is something that they could be doing better, or there's some solution for them because it doesn't exist yet. But anyway, with problem solving, it's really about, let's first go make sure we deeply understand the context around this particular problem. Who is it a problem for? When is it a problem? Where is it a problem? What are the constraints, and are they hard constraints versus assumed constraints, right? It's discovery, right? Doing your homework. But a lot of that is around, let's go out and see for ourselves, where this problem exists, right? What do we not know? What doesn't show up in all the quantitative data that we have? So we have to go and look and listen and learn, right? Stuff we learned in kindergarten, it's still applicable. Right. And so if you look without listening, you might miss something. And if you listen without looking, you might miss something. In fact, sometimes, so one of the discovery tools is called ethnography or ethnographic research. It's almost like a form of anthropology.
Okay.
Right. Let's go to where people do what they do and observe them there in their natural habitat. And the reason that's important, beyond, so for example, comparing that to an interview or a focus group, sometimes what people say doesn't actually match with what they do, right? You would
Really?
know this as an investigator, right? Sometimes people are trying to hide stuff intentionally. Other times they don't even realize, right? They'll use the language they have, but it doesn't match their actual actions or the why behind those actions. So we can marry those observations with listening, whether they're formal interviews or informal interviews, doesn't really matter. But we combine those two things, we have a really good shot at learning something that we can use those insights to figure out, ooh, what if we did this? Or what if we took this away? Or what if we did that?
Oh, I love that. And you're 100% right. It's when you sit down and have a conversation with somebody, I'll use the word interview, but to your point, formal, informal, it doesn't matter. It's a structured conversation to figure something out, right?
Right.
So in that process, sometimes people might intentionally withhold or mislead. Okay.
Sure.
But sometimes they just might be trying to pass the test. Like they're trying to figure out what you're going for. They're trying to be helpful. So they're trying to give you what they think you need, which takes us off course because it's not the reality. And then there's plenty of times where people aren't doing either. They literally believe they're telling you the truth. Just from an objective perspective, if we were to play that back, that's not really what's happening. Perhaps my favorite example of this is when somebody cuts me off to tell me what a great listener they are.
Nice.
And that's one of those moments, just like straight face, smile and nod, keep talking. But you talked about context and observation, two of my very favorite words in concepts. So you talked about you can listen without using your eyes or without hearing, or you can use your eyes or your hearing and not listening, but you're always missing something. For me, that word observation is all encompassing. If I'm observing, then I'm trying to use everything I can. So like in your work, I think swapping out here, I'm telling you what I think. That's not what this conversation is supposed to be about, but swapping out, listen for observe. Like it encompasses everything that you're already talking about and illustrating, and also the power of context, because the same action, the same behavior, the same thought can mean so many different things in different contexts. When you're applying this design thinking process, how critical a role is developing contextual awareness?
Well, without it, you might as well just be flying blind. So for example, I hope I can explain this with words well enough, because it's an example we use in teaching a lot of different things. Data delusion, like be careful about what's not in the quantitative data you have, regardless of how robust it is, regardless of how voluminous it is. So the situation is a suburban shopping center. It's got big box retail. It's got, a theater. It's got grocery store. It's got all the stuff, right? It's really well manicured. It's a nice place. It's a lovely place. And there's this one T intersection within the shopping center. Almost everyone who comes to the stop sign on the T is going to turn left to go toward one of the exits. The road they're turning onto does not have a stop sign, right? So it's just the one stop at the T. So we set up a camera to see how many cars actually stop at that stop sign before turning left and how many kind of roll through the intersection. So then we put all that data in a table. This type of vehicle, approximately the age of the driver, the gender of the driver, we can tell, the color of the car, two-door, four-door, right, SUV, sedan, what have you. They would ask people, all right, look at this data. Can you surmise why some people stop and some people don't? Just looking at the data. And also make sure you understand, bring to bear what you know about drivers, young drivers, older drivers, right? Whatever stereotypes you might have, they're stereotypes for a reason. Bring all that to bear. Why do some people stop and some people not? And then afterward, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe it's this other thing. Well, let's look at the tape, right? Roll the tape. Well, one thing that's not in the data, what time of day is it? Right? Is it day? Is it night? Is it raining? Is it not raining? Is it Saturday afternoon? Is it Monday afternoon? Is it busy? Not busy? There's nothing about how much traffic is on that other road. But the biggest thing that doesn't show up in the data, would probably never show up in the data, kind of back to this notion of context and circumstance, is that, right? So Matt, you're at this stop sign and you're going to turn left. And you're looking, you need to know if anybody's coming. Well, there's a huge hedge. This beautifully landscaped shopping center has this huge hedge to the right. If you're in a sedan, you can't see over it. So what do you have to do? You have to ease out into the intersection. You roll through the stop sign so you can see. If you're in an SUV or a truck, you can look right over the hedge. So you stop. Had nothing to do with the driver, the gender, any of that stuff. But that physical landscape is part of the context. And without it, good luck at coming up with what you think is the cause and what you think then might the solution. Is it training? When you train people? Like, no, you need to cut the hedge.
Yeah.
That's it.
Here's $100 solution to your worried $1 million problem.
Yeah.
But that's a tremendous point. What isn't the data telling you? What are some of the overlooked, unforeseen things that we never know everything? And as soon as we think we've got it all figured out, or as soon as we think we have a data set that tells us everything we need to know, then we're behind. We're behind already. So that's a great illustration in the power of context. Asking ourselves, what isn't the data telling us? What don't we know? And going from there. And I know we're going to find a way to get to asking questions to help get us the data we really need. But before we get there, I want to take a step back to a couple of things that you've already talked about. So you talked about kind of practices and steps or processes to design thinking. And I want to go back and touch on that just for a second. We don't need to do like a whole deep dive into teaching design thinking, but just for an overview to help put a framework around the conversation that we're already 10 minutes into, but whatever. what is the basic framework or steps for design thinking?
Yeah. So the framework we use, and there are as many different versions of this framework as there are consultants and authors and books and TED Talks and what have you. I'm of the opinion that they all kind of say the same thing. It's just maybe sliced and diced a little differently. We use a 6-step framework, which is, once you have your design challenge articulated, what are we actually trying to solve for and who and all that stuff? You start with discovery, followed by, and it might even just be a pause, but a framing or reframing. Like now that we've done some homework, we've done some research, is this still the right problem to solve? Did we find a better problem to solve? Does this problem not even need to be solved at all? Okay, great. Now we can move forward or go back, right? So it looks linear, but there's a lot of iterative and, back and forth with this process. But discovery, reframing, and then ideation, right? Let's brainstorm. But okay, now that we know what we're trying to solve, how might we solve for this, right? What else? All those sorts of things. Come up with lots of ideas, narrow it down, which ideas are really worth exploring further. The next step is prototyping. And for us, we define prototyping very broadly. A prototype is any visual representation of an idea so that other people can understand it and react to it. Now, I'm just going to preview this. Reacting to it means you need to be prepared to listen to their reaction. Like wide open, just take it in. You know what you think, you want to know what they think. So after prototyping, kind of similar to prototyping, now we're getting a little bit closer to realist testing. Let's take this thing out to the real world and test it. We refined it with our prototyping. Maybe we had to go back and do some more discovery, but discovery, framing, reframing, ideation, prototyping, testing. But eventually, no matter how many iterations and how many steps back and forward you take, you got to launch. You got to ship. The very first podcast I ever started listening to when I got into this world of design thinking and innovation back in the mid-2000s was from a guy named Phil McKinney, who used to be the director of innovation at HP. And he has a phrase that I love as it relates to launching. And he says, ideas without execution are hobbies. And I'm not in the hobby business. I'm like, yes, thank you. Because it's easy to get excited about an idea. Someday maybe I'm going to like that. Nope. Ideas are cheap. Ideas are kind of not worth anything. What can you actually do eventually? So launching, but even though that shows up at the end, there's this aspect of launching, which you have to be thinking about all the way through, is that innovation almost by definition means you're changing something. Which means for whatever it is you're doing, new product, new service, new process, new experience, new whatever, for it to be successful and sustainably successful, somebody's probably going to have to start doing something different. Somebody's going to have to change some behavior. Start doing something new, stop doing something old, which means you need to think about how you influence that behavior change in your design. You can learn a lot if you listen, right, all the way through, or you can just say, hey, we have used this great process. We're awesome. We've developed this awesome thing. Here you go. If we only had smarter customers, this would have worked. Okay. I mean, that's an approach, but good luck with that. So that's kind of the overall process.
Oh, that's great. And I can understand why it comes off as like step 1, step 2, step 3, to be able to explain it and walk people through it. But it's not even a cycle. It's almost like a spaghetti chart. Like we're going to keep going back and forth, but we're working our way down. I almost think of like it's a maze. Like we're going to work our way from the start to the finish. And these are the guideposts or frameworks that we do it. You talked about innovation requiring change, and that change is often behavior, which gets us all the way back to how we started the conversation, human-centered design. If this is a human-centered innovative process from the very beginning, we can start reducing resistance and increasing the commitment to change by the time we get to the launch and post-launch and all of those things, and why the approach that you take is so critical. And I think that falls into two other themes that you've mentioned. Reactions, what are people's reactions? And of course, listening and observing to those. So from a human design standpoint, and when I'm thinking about change, it could be something small. Hey team, here's a new process. It could be something big. Hey, here's a new implementation for software, whatever. But anywhere on that spectrum, what are techniques that you've seen work successfully for eliciting and observing the reactions necessary to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success?
Yeah, probably the biggest one and oftentimes when I describe design thinking, I'll say this prototyping step, this prototyping phase, if there's any magic in design thinking, it's here. And it's not because prototyping is in itself magical. It's not. It's just my experience. It's not widely practiced. That we go from, I've got a good idea. I know the picture I have in my head is a good idea. I know this will work. And maybe I'm right. Maybe I do know this will work. But I haven't prototyped it. I haven't really gotten a lot of useful feedback. And I just move forward and then I launch. Well, I don't know what I don't know. Maybe I'm right. Good chance I'm not. Good chance I've overlooked something. So what prototyping does, say, hey, here's our problem. We've done some discovery. We've decided, yes, this is the right problem, or change it a little or change it a lot. We've done some brainstorming. We've decided which ideas are really worth exploring further. Well, instead of just let's develop those and launch them, prototyping says, let's make a visual representation. It could be a sketch. It could be a diagram. It could be a role play. It could be a wireframe. Doesn't matter. It could be Legos and Play-Doh and, whatever. But make it visual. Well, one, if you have a group working on this, and almost always it's a group effort, those visual representations lead to shared understanding. Like we make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. And then once we do that, then it becomes, all right, great. Now, before we spend any more time or energy on this, right? So we talk about the fidelity of prototype. You want to start with low fidelity. Just good enough, just the smallest amount of investment of time and energy and money to say, hey, we're thinking about this. What do you think about this? So that people are like, oh, okay, I think I understand what do you mean? Like, yeah. Oh, no, actually this. Okay, great. Now, what do you think? What do you like? What questions or concerns do you have? What suggestions do you have to improve it? And then really listen. So what we want is candid feedback. And there are ways to do that. And there are ways to sort of put barriers up. You say it, but you don't actually elicit it. So prototypes are one of the most powerful ways we have in design thinking to elicit feedback, to elicit information that can help shape, go forward, go back, go left, pull the plug. Yeah.
That's a great example. And I love how you said that it can be anything. We can scratch it on the whiteboard. I don't have to hire an architect to build me a 3D model of whatever this thing is that we're talking about. So it's a great point. And I also think I see a unique opportunity in there too with like the low fidelity piece. And I would love your thoughts on this, is because it's low quality, unfinished. And I'm saying that in air quotes for everybody that's just listening and not seeing. I'm not trying to assault anybody's ideas, but it gives maximum room for interpretation, for addition, for subtraction, for creative interpretation, for all these things. If I present you with a finished product and say, hey man, what do you think? Well, now, I mean, it's done. How much can I really add to it? Even if I have an idea, it's too late. I don't want to piss you off. So now I'm gonna, But if I hand you something that is at best a quarter baked, now there's all kinds of freedom in there to contribute and save face both ways. You don't have to worry about your idea actually being great or not, because look at where we are in the process. And you don't have to worry about offending me because I'm not presenting you with something that I feel like I completed.
100% right. I mean, you absolutely nailed it for all those reasons. So one of the things we talk about when you are trying to elicit candid feedback, right, with prototypes, prototype early in the process, early enough. Show your prototype early, right? Half baked, quarter baked, the less finished it looks, the better. Because people may not even realize that they're withholding candid feedback because there's no room for them. We often talk about bless your heart feedback. So, right.
For everybody not in the South, that's not a compliment.
Yeah. Right. Bless your heart can mean lots of different things. But one of those meanings is, God, I think you're a dumbass.
Yeah.
But I don't want to offend you. So I'm not going to say that. So I'll say, oh, you wore that shirt with those shoes? Bless your heart. Well, bless your heart feedback is not useful, right? I don't need you to not hurt my feelings. So I need to help you not hurt my feelings by showing you something that clearly is low fidelity. And I were sharing this with a group last week. Let's say what you need to share is on a PowerPoint slide. You got a diagram, you got something. There's a feature within PowerPoint now. You'll say you got a bunch of boxes and lines and arrows and what have you, that you can change the lines from being nice and straight and clean to sketched. So just sketched lines just tells my brain that this isn't finished. You can tell me this isn't finished, but it looks finished. So, right. So you're creating this dissonance, and I'm not sure I can overcome that to give you candid feedback, because I might just say, gosh, you spent a lot of time on this and we're friends and looks great. Good job. Carry on.
Great work, man. Well done.
Yeah. Not helpful.
There's another underlining theme with what you're saying. And if I'm misinterpreting, as always, tell me. But that we have to earn the right to receive candid feedback. That all too often, if we're somebody who is quote unquote in charge, like this is my project, my group, I'm leading, I'm facilitating, I'm in charge to some degree, whatever, that people are going to be less likely to be open and honest with us because there are more two-way consequences involved in that process. Sure. So anything we can do, from the timing we seek that feedback, to the stage we seek that feedback, to how we ask for it, how we respond, all those things, we earn that candid feedback. It's kind of gets back to lowest common denominator theory. If I ask 10 people for feedback and none of them give it to me, well, whose fault is that? There's no way 10 independent people decided on their own I'm not worthy of their feedback. Very clearly, right. I need to change what I'm doing. So there's these subtle layers to what you're sharing that are so important, not just from like a physical design standpoint, but from that human-centered communication standpoint that none of this works without.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you pointed that out, because really that's the kind of wrapper about human-centered. You are dealing with human beings. And it's been proven time and time and time again by people in the behavioral economics space and psychology space that we are predictably irrational. Mm-hmm. We are irrational beings. So instead of trying to, if only, just accept it. This is part of the deal. If you're designing with humans or for humans, you gotta account for them. So that notion of help them set the stage to make it easier for them to give you candid feedback. Because we can say it all day long, but that's hard, right? You're asking somebody to take a risk. The elements of psychological safety are all a big part of that. And so make it easier for them to be candid with you. Just another quick technique when the prototyping phase is give people more than one option. Hey, we're thinking about this, or this. What do you think? Because if I give you one, well, even though I may not say so, I may not use my words, but everything, my body language, everything else is saying, this is my one and only idea. And there's a saying we use is that there's nothing more dangerous than an idea when it's the only one you have. And from getting feedback, if people think it's the only one you have, maybe you got 5 and you only brought out 1. No, at least bring out 3. We're clearly not married to one of these yet. Maybe we are, but what do you think? And we may get something from it. We may elicit like, oh, yeah, we thought this was option 3. And you're saying, no, this is number 1 with a bullet. Like, cool. Now we got smarter. That's what we hope to do. Yeah.
So you talk about getting smarter. And you also earlier talked about, we don't know what we don't know. None of us do. Like as soon as anybody says I've got it all figured out, you're dead. Yeah. There's always something that we don't know. And in a previous conversation, you talked about how we need to learn how to be cool being wrong. And I don't know if you realize it or not, but you mentioned maybe my favorite Yoda quote. And for those of us of a certain age, like trying to pick a favorite Yoda quote, let alone not saying it out loud in his voice, are challenges in and of their own. But we must unlearn what we have learned, right? Yeah. So can you please talk to us about the importance of being cool with being wrong and unlearning things that we previously might have thought were certain?
Yeah. Gosh. So we could spend an hour on this.
Well, let's get going.
I will. I'll share with you one of my absolute favorite resources. It's a TED Talk from a woman named Julia Galef, 11-minute TED Talk, one of the most brilliant things I've ever watched. And I've watched it many, many times. I share it in classes all the time. My only nitpick is with the title. The title of her TED Talk is Why You Think You're Right Even When You're Wrong. And I only wish it had been titled Why We Think We're Right Even When We're Wrong. Because it's not them, it's us, it's all of us. And she lays out this, again, it's just brilliant. And I'm going to try not to say brilliant again, but I probably will, because it's brilliant.
Cool. That's cool.
She lays out this comparison, contrasting between what she calls scout mindset versus soldier mindset. And the soldier mindset is a little bit easier to understand. This notion that, there's something we think or believe that we believe is true, that we know is true, that we hold to be true. And also we come up against some information that runs counter to that. How do we react to that? So soldier mindset is we either defend what we know or think or feel or believe, or we attack these people who are bringing us this, this heresy, this, what are you talking about? That can't be right. Everyone knows that the sun revolves around the earth. I mean, just look. What are you, crazy? Or scout mindset, a scout in a military operation is their job is just to go see what is. Our map says if we go over this hill, there's a road and it'll take us to the next town. Scout, go to the top of the mountain and see what you see. And they're like, oh, nope, it's not a road, it's a river and it's flooded. Well, you don't come back and say, you know what, we need a new scout. We need a scout that'll match what's on my map. Or you say like, oh, we should update our map. Again, easy to say, kind of easy to understand, hard to do, hard to live when it's what I think or believe or feel or know is true that maybe isn't. At the very beginning of the movie, The Big Short, have you seen this? The Michael Lewis book, right? The financial crisis, the housing crisis.
I'll confess I haven't. I do know what it's about. I'm aware of it, but I haven't seen it or read it for the
great adaptation of the story. Anyway, at the very beginning, it opens with a Mark Twain quote that says, I think I've got it exactly right. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Right. And it's everything we just said. Also, it turns out that quote is misattributed to Mark Twain. Mark Twain didn't actually, there's no evidence he said or wrote that. So that's kind of funny, right? Kind of ironically funny. But it's this notion that when we discover we're wrong, or we would think we might be wrong, how we react matters. If we get defensive, we're unlikely to learn anything. We might just double down on being wrong. And there's absolutely no benefit to being wrong longer, right? There's no reward, there's no medal, there's no trophy. I was wrong the longest, yay me, perseverance. And that, the opposite side of the coin is that we all reserve the right to get smarter. Now, whether we take, make use of that right, that's up to us. And the more attached we are to something, the harder it is to realize that, oh, I might be wrong. And it doesn't mean I'm stupid. It means I just didn't know. And now I know different or better or more. Like, cool. I got smarter today. That's a good day.
Yeah, I believe, and fact check me on this, I believe it's social judgment theory that essentially says that the tighter one of our the closer one of our ideas is positioned to our self-image.
Oh, yeah.
That when we are presented with like rational, factual evidence that counters the belief, it actually has a boomerang effect. And instead of moving us back towards a neutral learning position, pushes us further into a defensive position because of how tightly we already hold that idea to who we see ourselves.
Exactly. And that has nothing to do with intelligence.
No.
It has everything to do with how attached am I to this? And especially if it's intertwined with my identity, good luck. Other people can see it, but it's really hard for us to see it and really hard for us to go, I just learned this last week as I was getting ready to teach a class on one of these discovery techniques called jobs to be done. But it's this whole, in comparing being customer centric versus product centric, went back and, geocentric, the Earth is at the center of the solar system versus the sun is. And what I just recently learned is, although Copernicus, it's like, mid 1500s, said, hey, I think the sun's at the center, right? I've got this theory. It took hundreds of years before the rest of the world really like, okay, we get it. But here was the really interesting thing to me. It was in the 1800s before the Catholic Church allowed this heliocentric model to be printed in books. So 300 years passed because, I don't know exactly why, but you could surmise why the church or church leaders would be so defensive of this notion that the Earth is not at the center of everything. Anyway, I just thought that was fascinating.
No, you're right. And it speaks to the idea or the concept, because I'm about to use the word idea twice in the same sense if I'm not careful. It speaks to the concept that often ideas serve a purpose. And so if I'm trying to persuade somebody, if I'm trying to create behavioral change, if I'm trying to get somebody to accept an alternative idea or option, if I can't think through the purpose that this idea serves for somebody, and why they should actually resist my thought in loyalty to their current idea, then my opportunity to persuade them from where they're currently thinking it's going to be a waste of everybody's time and effort. It's just not going to work, because it's not saying that's a good idea. However, if you put it on a scale against this idea, here's all the rational reasons and facts and data and it's not going to work.
Right.
There's to my knowledge, which might be limited and more limited than I thought now that you've pointed out, I don't know of any emotional problem that's been solved with a rational solution.
Yeah.
So getting behind the purpose of the ideas is so important.
Yeah.
Which I think ties into something I've heard you say before. I'll give it a shot. You can tell me if I'm wrong. I've heard you say that innovation is a contact sport.
Yes.
What do you mean?
Because innovation almost always requires collaboration. And collaboration is most definitely a team sport and most definitely a contact sport, meaning sometimes you're going to get bruised, elbows are going to get thrown, right? You're going to get kicked. You're going to get your feelings hurt. You're going to hurt somebody else's feelings. You're going to argue. You're going to disagree. And you have to be able to do that well, right? It's another scale. We can do it poorly. We can do it well. We can do it, kind of depends. And part of that, part of being able to collaborate well, part of being able to, thrive in a contact sport setting is being able to say, like, well, here's what I think, and here's why. And you respond to that or react to that. Here's my idea. Here's this prototype. Here's this version. And to go, and not to be personally attached to the idea. This is my idea, but it's not me. This is the idea, but it's not me. And if you can poke holes in it, well, great, let's make a better idea. And then just back to adoption and, working with human beings, and you nailed it earlier with, if you can make it easier for people to give you candid feedback to this thing, well, now this has become our idea and not my idea. And you're much more likely to support our idea than my idea, right? So I need a champion. I need somebody else to help me, so give space, give people room to have some meaningful impact, to meaningfully shape the idea. One, just because we are probably smarter, we are smarter than me, but there are other reasons to, you got to be careful you're not doing it disingenuously. But, that matters in terms of this, there's rarely is there just a straight shot. I've got a great idea. And everybody goes, yes, awesome. Let's go. Well done, you. Lots of back and forth, lots of give and take. And so the notion that it's a contact sport, if you know that going in, you won't be surprised when you get bumped and kicked and knocked in the head or whatever.
It's how the process is supposed to work.
Yeah, that's not abnormal. I used to be a high school basketball coach. You go in the lane, you're going to get hit. Don't look at the ref. Like, what did you think was going to happen in here? Be prepared for it and deal with it and plan accordingly. If you don't want to get hit, don't go in the lane.
Yeah. And if you don't want to get better, don't ask feedback. Don't ask for feedback.
Exactly.
And often, not always, because sometimes people can give feedback from a manipulative or mean-spirited place. Hopefully that's far more rare than in reality. But often it's the feedback that hurts that's the most valuable.
Yeah.
because that's somebody, if the feedback hurts, it's a likelihood it's somebody who has some sort of intimate might be the wrong word, but like close access to us. We see them frequently. We work with them frequently. We live in the same house. We have like a real relationship with that person. Yeah. So they've had close enough access for a long enough period of time to likely make and withhold a valuable observation until they finally got to a point where either they felt like they could share it or they couldn't not share it anymore. And so if it hurts, it's probably worth taking a step back and letting it settle and thinking it through, because we're not going to get better without it.
Right. Yeah. And obviously that works outside of innovation, any collaboration space. How well do you respond to feedback matters. It matters whether or not that person is willing to take the risk to do it again. Yeah. Like, hey, I want candid feedback, Michael. You give me something like, well, Michael, I'm sorry, you're wrong on this. And you feel how I'm just turning this off. Like, well, you're probably not going to make that mistake again.
Yeah.
Right. I've just said, don't ever do that again. I don't really want candid feedback. What I want is you just to tell me that I'm right.
Yes.
Are we clear?
As often as possible, please.
Yeah. Exactly.
As often as possible. But your point about making it easy for people to give that critical and that honest feedback from a business development sense, everybody's heard, don't make it hard for people to give you their money. Well, don't make it hard for people to give you the truth.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to be set up over a period of time, because people are keeping track and they have a mental Rolodex of memories and experiences and expectations, and setting that up to be successful. So it feels like one of the core ideas within all this is a creative approach to problem solving, getting out of that check the box kind of linear structure of problem solving. What are some techniques that you've, again, seen successful in creating a more creative, is that even proper grammar? In developing a more creative problem solving environment?
Yeah. So I can give you my number one tip, number one technique, the number one barrier, and the tip to overcome that barrier. So my guess, I know me, and probably every one of your listeners have been in a really crappy brainstorming session.
Sure.
I mean, almost everybody has. The number one reason, at least in my experience, brainstorming sessions suck is because, hey guys, we're trying to get some ideas about this. What do you got? Steve, what do you think? Steve offers up an idea, and we immediately start chewing on that idea. Tearing it apart, why that won't work, or what about this, or what about that? And the meeting just devolves almost immediately onto whatever that idea was. Doesn't matter how good or bad it was. We just boom. So the technique is to separate idea generation from idea evaluation. It really is that simple. I mean, there are a lot of other things, but that's number one. Separate, hey, we're just going to have ideas. We're going to throw them out. And actually, a rule from the world of improv, and I believe you've had an improv person on your podcast.
Yeah, Gary's awesome.
It's one of the rules of improv is accept all offers.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of when we're in idea generation phase, we accept everything. We don't. And this is not the same as there are no bad ideas. That's incorrect. There are lots of bad ideas, terrible ideas.
I've had them.
I mean, yeah, we've all had them, right? I mean, don't say, hey, there are no bad ideas today. Like, I don't know what room you're in, buddy, but I promise you there's going to be some bad ideas here. I know. And so it's not the same. It's to say, right now, we're just going to generate. And as much as possible, capture ideas, don't just say them, capture them, sticky notes and Sharpies. But then, and only then, all right, let's figure out which ones feel like they're worth exploring further, which ones are someday maybes, and which ones are like, I'm sorry, Steve, are you on drugs today? What's going on with you? Anyway, just separate those two phases. Your ideation session, your brainstorming session is likely to be much more productive. And people actually feel like they were able to contribute and they were heard. Another piece of that, kind of going hand in hand with that, is so let me just pause. Are you comfortable thinking out loud, or would you rather have like fully formed thoughts before they escape your lips into the world?
Well, I would rather have fully formed thoughts, but that doesn't seem to work for me. So I think out loud all the time, often in front of groups of people, and I try to limit the embarrassment involved in the process.
Yeah. So you and I are similar in that regard. Like sometimes I have to think out loud. I'll even tell people like, look, I might disagree with myself before I finish because I don't know where I'm going yet.
Yep.
People like us tend to dominate brainstorming sessions. We're like, hey, who's got an idea? Because we'll just start talking. And our brethren who would much rather have a fully formed idea before they share it, well, we've just sucked all the oxygen out of the room. So the same thing with, separate idea generation from evaluation, give people time and space to work individually, and especially write it down first and then share. Then we both, all people on that scale of, introvert, extrovert, or whatever you want to call it, because it always depends on the situation, the topic, what have you. But you're making space for everyone to contribute versus just those people who are well equipped and interested in an audio only ideation session.
Yeah, all fantastic points. And I'm sure many people listening like me, I'm not saying many people listening are like me. I hope for their sake that they're not. But when they hear you say the brainstorming sessions are now reflecting back on brainstorming sessions I've been a part of and been like, oh yeah, I can see where that went astray. And how many good ideas never got on the table, A, because we ran out of time, or B, because someone's idea got shredded. And I'm like, well, screw that. I'm not giving them my idea. I don't want to get shredded. And so it just never gets on the table.
Yeah. Yeah. Because not only if an idea gets shot down, often that person feels like they got shot down.
Yes.
So they're like, all right, I'm out. Luckily, I've got my phone right here. So you guys talk amongst yourselves.
They're
out. They're done.
Yeah. Yeah. You're 100% right. And one of the things that I love about what you do and how you approach it is constantly respecting the power of protecting people's self-images. And that's like a never-ending well of how do you recognize that and how do you do it? It goes on forever.
Yeah.
But from a human-centered design standpoint, that starts with how do we help people protect their self-image? Because if we can do that, they're more likely to communicate honestly, accept other ideas, navigate the emotional roller coaster, change their behavior. All these things that we're talking about, if they can protect their self-image, they're likely to do it. If they can't, they won't. Yeah. About 40 minutes ago, I threatened a conversation about questions, and then we just kept on rolling. So this is a bit of a hard pivot, but I'm trying to keep an eye on the clock because I really appreciate you sharing your time today. So could you please walk us through the role that effective questions play in this human-centered approach to design thinking?
Yeah, sure. So this is kind of questioning 101, but in this context, it matters a lot. If I'm trying to learn, if I'm interviewing somebody, I want to learn from them open-ended questions versus closed-ended questions, right? Yeah. Because what I really want them to do is to talk. Much like an investigator, you just want them to start talking. You'll learn all sorts of things versus, clipped answers. So for example, it's if I were to say, Michael, what was your first car? And you tell me, it's going to feel like we're doing a live survey, which is a waste of, both of our time. But if I were to ask Michael, tell me about your first car. I know technically it's not a question, but tell me about your first car. And then I just sit back and let you go and then use all the, the techniques of good interviewing, right? The pause, let them fill in the space, tell me more. But what I want to do is learn. And part of that is to keep yourself in learning mode, which can be really hard if the topic or the subject of the project or that interview is something you as the interviewer know well. So we talk about adopt a beginner's mind when you go into interview to observe whatever. And if you're in a situation you don't know anything about it, it's easy to have a beginner's mind. So for example, we did a project years ago. We were hired by a training company who was hired by a company that at the time owned 8 NASCAR tracks around the country. And the training company was hired to develop training for the employees. And they hired us to help them better understand what's it like to be an employee at the track on their big race weekends. And so I had never been to a race before. So those first few visits, for me, it was so easy to be, an open-minded, wide-eyed observer because everything was new. And it got a little bit harder as we went on. But the training company put a person on our observation team that had been going to tracks his whole life, and his work at the training company had been a lot around this situation. So when we'd go in to observe and interview, he simply couldn't help himself but say like, oh, well, Michael, what you should be doing is this, or here's how you fix that. So when we're in that questioning mode, when we're in learning mode, we need to stay in learning mode. We're not there to evaluate. We're not there to fix anything. We're not there to solve anything. We want to learn. And then the idea of being humans is to recognize when our own biases step in, which is also why, as much as possible, whenever we go into the field to do the discovery work, is to go in teams. So an example where I failed miserably, we were at one of these tracks and we were observing specifically these 3 volunteers, young men, they were probably early 20s, these 3 volunteers who were doing traffic control, right? Come on, you stop, that sort of thing, at a really busy 3-way intersection. Apparently I do a lot of work with intersections. Anyway.
I was going to say, did it have a hedge?
Yeah, no. But anyway, so this idea of we're there to learn, not to evaluate. But I'm watching these 3 guys kind of do a piss poor job of managing traffic, right? They're not coordinated because they haven't been trained. But I was just watching state troopers out on the highway, very crisp movements. It's clear they know what's going on. They're coordinated. And these guys are just doing the best they can, right? Which I knew that. I mean, that's kind of what we were there. What's it like to work the track on these weekends? What I didn't know going in is most of the people working are actually volunteers. They literally haven't been trained. Here's a vest. You 3 go over there and direct traffic. Well, anyway, where I failed miserably was at one point, I noticed this one guy is doing traffic control one-handed. And I'm like, what are you doing? And I've got this on tape, right? I've got pictures that we're shooting a lot of video and taking pictures. He's eating a sandwich. This clown is eating a sandwich. Hopefully I've already given away the game here. This clown is eating a sandwich while he's supposed to be working. And I remember, I tucked that away. And then that evening with my team, we're like going over our notes, what did we learn today? I'm like, oh yeah, by the way, at the intersection, luckily one of my teammates reminded me of my own thing, what I know well. It's like, well, I wonder why he was eating a sandwich. Well, I already decided because he's a clown. Oh, well, that's a good question. I wonder why this human is behaving this way. And it turns out because they had not staffed for breaks. We got 3 positions. They should have had 4 people, but they had 3 people. So you're just going to stay there and work till we're done today, right? 14 hours later. Good luck eating or taking a break or whatever. But I had gone into evaluation mode, judgment mode, instead of learning mode. And luckily, because I had some teammates who were like, so I say all that to say this. One of our other operating principles is when you're seeing someone behave a certain way, in the workplace, in the world, wherever, that oftentimes it's not the mice, it's the maze, right? Their environment, their context, their circumstance has a big influence on what they do or don't do. I immediately went to, what's wrong with this mouse? What I should have done is just, I noticed the mouse is doing this. And then later I wonder why, what might be leading, influencing this behavior. So that's kind of far afield from questioning, but the notion of you're asking questions, you're there to learn, be careful you don't slip into evaluator mode.
It's not far afield from questions for exactly what you just said. In an interviewing context, it's much easier than we realize to ask questions that lead to implied expected answers, or we cut somebody off, we answer for them. So we end up influencing the data without even realizing it. And selfishly for me, when I worked for WZ, particularly when I worked for Dave Zalowski, I would go do these interviews. I would think I did a great job. I would get on an airplane. I'd be very proud of myself. I would come back into the office the next day. We would put this video on the old projector screen in the conference room. I would sit next to Dave and I would leave with my ego in a shopping bag. But that's how you start to learn some of these unintentional impacts that we have on conversation. So that's all an extremely important point. And there's a fine line between learning and judging. And I think as human beings, we're hardwired to judge. We fall back on our biases, our heuristics, our expectations, our experiences. This is what this must mean. I was looking for X. I got Y. It can't be my fault that I was looking for X. It has to be their fault that they did Y. So boom, we start judging. But I love what you said. It's not the mice, it's the maze. That's such a brilliant statement. Behavior doesn't happen in a vacuum. Nobody ever says or does anything in a vacuum. There were things that influenced the track that got us here. We could get all crazy and go back into like DNA and generations, or we could just say, well, this dude hasn't had a break in 12 hours and he was getting hangry. Have you not seen the Snickers commercial? He needed to eat. So that, it all lines up.
Yeah.
Do you have the tell me more question? I think is generally a good one to help people open up. When they're already compliant and in the conversation, tell me more certainly helps. If somebody's still in that initial judgment phase of, why are you talking to me? What's this all about? No, tell me more. No, I'm not sure I want to. But once we've cracked that ice and more involved, that's certainly a very helpful question to ask. Are there some others that you've experienced? And again, I know this is contextual, of course.
Sure.
But are there some other questioning techniques, especially during this human-centered design process, that you see to be more effective?
Show me instead of tell me. Sometimes, if we're in a context where that makes sense, because then they can just, especially if I'm in their space, in their natural habitat, I'm at their workstation, I'm at their part of the plant, I'm at their part of the truck. Well, show me. Well, one, I get to play dumb easily. It comes natural to me. And so both. I'm here to learn. Show me, how you do this. And then asking why in a way that doesn't feel threatening. So actually why'd you do that? Or that's interesting. Why do you do that? Do you always do it that way? Or any number of things. And so it's them going, oh, well, let me show you. And that's exactly what I'm here to do. I'm here to learn. Even if you're the worst person in the world at your job, you're the expert at being the worst person in the world at your job. Later, we can go back and say, all right, I don't know if other people do this, but how might we help this person not do it this way? How do I make sure no one else does it this way? So show me is one of those techniques.
I love that. I love both of the things that you just said. I think show me is fantastic. It puts the other person in control. It conveys respect. It conveys appreciation. And when somebody else feels like they're in control, resistance levels typically drop. So they're going to be more open. And there's a line in an old country song, I'm smart enough to let you think I'm dumb. There's actual real advantages there. Teach me, dude. Just teach me. I mean, it's got to be authentic, right? I mean, if they see through that, we're dead. Right. I love all of that. There's so many reasons why show me is a great technique. And even with what you just said about why is one of the most dangerous questions we can ever ask somebody, because it comes across as an accusation or an attack a significant amount of the time. We don't think of it that way, but the person receiving it does. So to just preempt it with something like, oh, that's interesting. That's cool. I hadn't thought of that. I didn't realize that. Those kinds of things thin the ice before we come back with, why do you do it that way? So now it's perceived, our intentions are received. I'm actually curious. I'm not judging.
Exactly. I'm curious. That's interesting, right? That's, fascinating. There was a product store, if you want to, I wasn't involved in this project at all. It was actually before my time at Bank of America. They had some researchers. In this case, they were trying to find problems worth solving for the target demographic was soccer moms. And so for this specific story, I'm telling the simplified version of it, but the researcher was sitting, this is like early 2000s. Researcher was sitting with this woman at her home as the woman was balancing her checkbook, right? Old school check register. And the researcher noticed that she was writing the check number. She was rounding up to whole numbers, right? So if the check was for, $65.38, she wrote it for $66 in a register. Like a good researcher, she went, that's interesting. Why do you do that? We said, oh, well, one, it's just easier to do the math. But two, this is how I make sure I don't overdraw my account. I know there's always some extra money in there that I'm not accounting for, but that'll help me not make a mistake. It's like, oh, cool. Writes it down. Eventually, when the research team comes back to the product team at B of A, that insight, that aha, and making note of it, because a lot of times when you're doing the research, you don't know what's going to be useful later. You just want to capture as much. You're just there to learn, capture as much as you can. Then later, we call it sense making, right? You make sense of what might this mean? We don't know. We got to get with the client involved. What does this mean to you? You have context we don't have. Which is also one of the reasons, just step out of the story for a moment. Rarely do we say, we'll go do the research for you. Like, we'll love to go do it with you. So you can also see, and now we can, our new eyes and your experienced eyes, together will come up with something. But anyway, that particular story, that observation to a note, to a conversation, led to Bank of America creating a product that they called Keep the Change, which is every time you use your debit card, if you sign up for this program and connect it to your savings account, every time you use your debit card, it did exactly what she was doing. It would round up, but put that money in your savings account because, they know, they've got all the data as Americans. We are terrible at saving money. So this was, hey, we're going to help you. We're going to make it easier for you. We're going to reduce the friction to you to save money. It also was a big moneymaker for the bank. It was profitable product. But all of that came from that insight and that researcher going, that's interesting. Tell me more about why you do that.
That's interesting. It's a beautiful lead in to illustrate curiosity over judgment. And you keep saying these super impactful things that I want to make sure people aren't missing. We don't know what's going to be important when we're collecting data. We are collecting puzzle pieces without knowing what the final picture is going to be. And as soon as we start thinking it's going to be a tiger, it's probably going to be a shark. So the more we can just realize that everything we're observing right now could be of value. If I can hang on to it, later on, it could very well be. From an investigator's mindset, we cracked open any number of cases with that. I'm having a conversation with somebody. We used to use kind of the ubiquitous term subject. I don't know if they're a victim, a witness, a suspect. Did they just happen to kind of be in the area, wrong place, wrong time? They've got nothing for me. I don't know. But the more we start talking to them and start collecting some of this, new stories come together, new perspectives come together, new ideas come together. Sometimes you sit down in front of somebody and you're like, I don't even know if this person was there that day. And 10 minutes later, you're like, oh, damn, he's the guy. But you didn't know that when the conversation started. So collecting that information as you go through, it could all be valuable. We used to use, decades ago, we used to use this video in some of our law enforcement classes where, it was regionally, it was a famous case. Very long story short, a wife goes missing. So the cops show up. The husband reports her missing. The cops show up and ask him what happened. And he says, well, she came home from work. We had dinner. She went out. It's been a couple of days. She still hasn't come home. Okay, whatever. But the cop who showed up at the door was patient. And here's another underlying theme that I think has been all around everything we've talked about today. Patience is probably the root cause or root skill that makes all of this work. You could argue curiosity and learning mindset and some other things, but patience is what drives this whole thing. That patrol officer was patient and didn't just say, okay, thank you. Well, where does she work? What does she drive? What was she wearing? All those other things. But then it came down to, what time did she get home? What'd you guys have for dinner? Who made it? What time did you eat? So what time did she actually leave? And all of that stuff doesn't necessarily sound like it's a big deal. Story that's already too long, a lot shorter. They end up finding her body. This isn't funny, but they find her body. They lived in an extremely cold climate, so her body was literally frozen in the trunk. It was wintertime, so her body is well preserved. There's video of them pulling her body out of the trunk, and it's literally frozen in like the stuffed in the trunk position. Yeah. Well, when they do the autopsy, they're able to examine the contents of her stomach. And because the husband had told the patrol officer that their vegetable for dinner that night was carrots, they were able to look at the decomposition of the carrots in the stomach, compare them to the timeline the husband provided, and say that in order for her to have the carrots at that state in her stomach, she had to be dead before she left the house. So what seems like an annoying set of questions to ask somebody for, and imagine the average patrol officer, right? Maybe she ran off with another guy that you don't know about. Like, maybe, all these other things that happen all the time. We're not going to worry about it just yet. He took the time. He was patient. He kept a learning mentality. He asked these curiosity-based questions to illustrate details from someone who ended up being guilty. And it was a potentially completely useless detail that solved the murder case.
Yeah. That's wild. That's wild. But that's fascinating, right? So I love that. Just being patient. Maybe so I think for me, I can tie that to this notion of being a learner, because ultimately we are there to help. We're there to help them solve or teach them how to solve something. So at some point you got to get into action mode, but not yet. Right? I'd already jumped into don't hire clowns to be volunteers for traffic control. And I missed the point.
Give a clown a break.
Yeah, exactly. Just, staff for breaks. This is not hard and this is not new, but y'all weren't doing it because I'd never had to staff for events. That never crossed my mind.
Yeah.
My teammate just primed me like, well, why do you think he was eating? Oh, it's a good question. Yeah.
And let me call out what you just said there to make sure that people don't miss it. Your teammate primed you. You didn't say your teammate asked you. You said your teammate primed you, which from like an ideation standpoint is an entirely different concept. If you're asking me for something, you just want the answer. What do you want for dinner? Pizza, whatever. But if they're priming you, they're actually causing you to think about a situation differently to potentially arrive at a different, altered, or better outcome. So even if we think about asking people questions as priming them, not in a manipulative way, like when I want pizza for dinner, I just clean the kitchen in the morning and leave the menu on the counter. So my wife walks by it 100 times and then says, hey, do you want pizza for dinner? As a matter of fact, I do. Sorry, Brooke. But if we think about asking people questions as priming them, now that's a whole different approach to getting the intelligence, not the information, but the intelligence that we need from them.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, absolutely.
And I didn't even get a chance to dive into the fact that you said find problems that are worth solving, because so many times we're focusing on what we think is the problem and it's not. We're focusing on the symptom, not the disease, all these things that we've already heard. But the right answer to the wrong question is still the wrong answer. And taking the time to unpack that is so important. Dude, we've already gone over an hour.
Yeah. I'll share a couple of links, a couple of resources. You include them in the show notes if you choose to. Done. So one is an awesome book called What's Your Problem? And it's all about reframing. It's about doing exactly what you just said. Like, how do we make sure we're solving the right problem, or that we're finding a problem worth solving? And some great techniques, and gets really specific. Do this, don't do that, that sort of thing. Something else you mentioned when you were talking about, we don't know when when you're doing an investigation, and for us, we're trying to figure out what is what. We're putting a puzzle together. Is it a tiger? Is it a shark? I don't know. You reminded me of a great essay Malcolm Gladwell wrote when he was writing for the New Yorker in early 2000. It's puzzles versus mysteries. And I'd never given that any thought until, he phrased it the way he so eloquently does. But I'll share that if you feel like it's worth sharing with your audience, do so. But it was that notion that, puzzles, you just need all the pieces. And mystery, you don't know what the pieces are. And it may not even be solvable. And sometimes we're not even sure what we're doing. Are we solving a puzzle, or are we hoping to solve a mystery? Well, let's figure it out as we go along.
And I just love that attitude. Figure it out. My son asked me a question the other day, how we're going to take care of something. And I looked at him like, I don't know, dude, we'll figure it out. And he looked at me and he's like, you're good at that. And my answer was, well, I hope so. But I try to make that like the consistent answer. What are we going to do? We're going to figure it out. What are we going to do? We're going to figure it out. Like, if we can create, at least for me, for my son, if I can create that investigative problem-solving mindset, we'll figure it out. Life is a series of solvable problems. Let's get after it. Maybe it's not the solution we thought we would end at, but let's get after it.
And there's an unspoken precursor to that. We'll figure it out is, I don't know, but we'll figure it out. And it's okay to, I don't know. Right now, I don't know. If it's my job to figure it out, I'll do the best I can. Or we've got ways to do that. But it's okay to not know, at least initially. Now, I mean, you can't always not know. Then at some point, why are you here? But it's okay to not know and not come up, because this. Do you know that, or are you just trying to come up with anything? Oh, which reminds me of one other thing, and I forget exactly where it goes in our conversation. But it's back to the feedback techniques, right? And making it easier for people to give you candid feedback. So what we've done, we're in that prototyping phase, right? We're sharing our prototypes, our exhibits, and we're asking for feedback. And we structure. We ask people, tell us what you like, tell us concerns or questions you have, and tell us any recommendations you have, which is now this is going to be our idea sort of stuff. But we also tell them when we're in these design sprint workshops, these intense 2-day, 3-day problem-solving sessions, is we're not going to react to your feedback. We're just going to capture it. And so what that does, it gives us the freedom not to have to respond to your feedback in the moment. Because you asked me a question like, well, this is great, but what are you going to do if it rains? Like, crap, I hadn't thought about that. And let me answer on the fly. Or you've made me get defensive, and now I'm defending my idea. And also we get into a back and forth that no one's capturing, so it never happened, right? If you don't write it down, I'm sorry, Senator, I have no recollection of that. And so this notion of we're going to ask you for feedback, we're going to capture it, but we're not going to respond to it. Unless it's a clarifying question. What does the blue mean? Because I can't give you feedback. I don't even know what that means. But now it's, what are you going to do if it rains? That's a great question. What else do you have? It gives me space and our team space not to react in the moment. So we can then go back and be thoughtful about how we react to this feedback. And we found that to be a really useful technique. So if you're in a situation where you can do that, please give me your feedback, but I'm not going to react to it so that I don't react inappropriately. And so I can make the most of it. I'll get back to you, after we do some sense making.
No, I love that. I think it's awesome for a bunch of reasons. You're setting the expectations. You're giving them and you an out. Hopefully they feel safe for talking. You're now not obligated to talk after, so that's great. And I'm going to have to figure out a way to wrap up this conversation because we're going to talk till dinner at this point.
Yeah.
But people have to, if they're going to read this book, they've got to read it like it's a metaphor because it's written for cops, but it applies to everything. It's called Memory Enhancing Techniques for Investigative Interviewing. It's written by Ed Geiselman and Ronald Fisher. It's about the cognitive interview, which is a tremendous interviewing tool. I'm going to shorten it up there.
Yeah.
I had a wonderful opportunity to pick Dr. Geiselman up at the airport and take him to dinner and hang out with him and co-facilitate a program and then interview him and do all this other cool stuff with him. And one of the things that he talked about from an interviewing standpoint, because their interviewing technique was specifically designed to get more truthful information out of emotional victims and witnesses.
Okay.
And one of the things he talked about that was so important was the clarity of expectations at the beginning and then turning control over to the other person. So things like you've already said, it's okay to say, I don't know. I'm just capturing. I'm not going to provide any feedback. Any little thing could be important. It doesn't make a difference how insignificant you think it might be. And there's the right way to go through it.
Sure.
But by providing that clarity of expectations and then handing control over to them and just non-judgmentally, and I'm going to interview Nerd Out all the way, capture the untainted narrative. Now you've got a data set that you can start working with. And I think that marries perfectly to what you're saying.
Yeah. I've never heard any of that, but I love that. And you're right. That's exactly what we're doing with that, is that the clarity of expectations and then giving them control, which hopefully makes them more comfortable. I just need to know what you think. What do you think?
Yep. There's no doubt the key to maintaining control over most conversations is to let the other person feel like they're in control.
Yeah. Love that. I'm going to make use of that. Thank you.
How it works.
Dude, I got smarter today.
You and me both. I've been taking notes the whole time, man. I got to stop here because if I don't, I'm going to keep you here for another hour. And I'm sure you've got things to do before you make breakfast tomorrow.
Sure.
So you've already mentioned sending a couple things over. I appreciate that. I'll put them in the show notes. For people who've been taking notes alongside me for this whole conversation, they want to stay connected with you. They want to follow up with you, maybe engage with you, certainly still learn from you. Where do they need to go to stay in touch and learn from you?
Yeah, two of the easiest places, fasterglass.com. That's the company, Faster Glass. Or just on LinkedIn, right? David Phillips. I guess in the URL, it's J. David Phillips. The J stands for genius. It's genius with a J, which I think speaks volumes.
Yeah. We'll do it. We'll go with it. Man, it was so great to see you. We ran into each other a month ago for the first time in years, and I couldn't be happier that we did. Thank you for having this conversation with me. I had high expectations. It exceeded all of them. This was fantastic. I look forward to staying in touch and not going however many years before we see each other.
Yeah, let's not do that again.
Man. Cool. Take care. Thank you so much. It was great to see you.
All right, same here. Thanks, Michael. Bye-bye.
David, dude, thank you for a fantastic conversation. I learned something every time we talk, and I learned a bunch today. Thank you so very much. If I wanted to highlight everything I got from that conversation, we'd be here for another hour. But a few things I love that you said. Innovation as a contact sport. Couldn't be more right. I absolutely love it. I also love how you highlighted the fact that it's cool to be wrong. We don't have to be right all the time. And often when we're wrong, there are a whole list of benefits that come with that. And along with that train of thought, adopting the beginner's mindset. There's always something we can learn, always an opportunity to grow, always a chance to evolve. I love all that you shared today, David. Thank you so very much. And thank you to all of you who listened to another great conversation today. I hope you took at least as many notes as I did and got as much from David in that conversation as I did. He shared a ton with us today. Thank you for being here. Before you go, we'd appreciate if you took a quick second to like the show again, share it, subscribe to it. Please leave us your feedback. I'm serious. We really would love to hear from you. And we would also be grateful if you took a quick moment to check out our sponsors, humantel.com. Head on over there, look at all of their research, and then choose the science-backed training that you feel is right for you to begin developing the skill set necessary to understand when people's emotions are changing by recognizing specific shifts in their facial expressions and nonverbal nonverbal communications. Highly recommend it. It's all there at humantel.com. Enter the code INQUASIVE25 for 25% off the training of your choice. Professional interviewers, go to certifiedinterviewer.com. That's where you can get all your questions answered about joining the International Association of Interviewers and earning your Certified Forensic Interviewer designation. It's all there. Head over to certifiedinterviewer.com. And finally, while you're online, please check out inquasive.com. That's where you can learn more about the programs our clients ask us to facilitate for their senior leaders, sales teams, HR teams, and more, as we teach them how to unlock hidden value in all of their high impact conversations. We appreciate you being here for another week. Thank you so much. Stay safe. Take care of each other. We'll see you next time.